Welcome to the Heroes of Fantasy Football Podcast.
And welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Heroes of Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host and the only guy on the show tonight, Christopher Felice, and this is our waiver show. It's been a fantastic week so far. I'm recording this about an hour before the Monday night game. Thanksgiving's right around the corner, so I hope you're all doing well for that. I hope all your preparations for the big day are going well, and Black Friday and Cyber Monday and all those shoppings and deals. Although nowadays, honestly, it's kind of like the whole week is kind of blocked out for that sort of stuff. So nevertheless, I hope you're getting the best deals on whatever you're doing for Christmas shopping, or maybe treating yourself with something, maybe getting yourself some, football merch for your favorite team. This would be a good time for me to plug merch if we had some. We don't worry. But if we did, I'd be saying it now. But without further ado, we're going to head right in to our waiver show this week. Starting with, of course, announcing the buys. Drum roll, please. There are no buys this week. That's right. Week 13, no buys at all. It's kind of weird to say that we're going into week 13 already, but it is what it is. So, yeah, there are no buys, so don't have to worry about, choose matchups. You will have the full power of your roster at your disposal. So with that being said, let's kind of get into the waivers this week. So back to what I said before, with keeping in mind the thinking of you're going to have everybody on your roster, I've tried to narrow things down to where perhaps you're thinking about injuries, bad matchups, really trying to whittle down who I believe you could use now and maybe also in the future for other matchups. So without further ado, we're going to head right into quarterbacks. This week we got two people to talk about here. First guy, we got Drake May, rostered on 19% on Yahoo Fantasy teams, going up against the Colts next week. This past week, he was 22 for 37 attempts with 221 yards and one touchdown, and also had one fumble. It wasn't the prettiest outing for Drake May, but going up against a Colts defense, which isn't also like the best. I believe they're like the sixth worst in terms of giving up points to the quarterback. I think that's a very, very promising matchup for a guy who's kind of he's figuring it out right now. We know he doesn't exactly have everything at his disposal. In fact, you could argue he has basically nothing at his disposal. He's making do with what he has, and it's working out really well. I have no qualms with him. I have no issues with him at all. If you need the quarterback, let's say you're dealing with like an injury or a bad matchup with the guy that you have, this is a guy that you could pick up. Moving on, our next guy is Russell Wilson, rostered in 36% of Yahoo Fantasy Leagues. Going up against the Cincinnati Bengals next week, he completed 21 passes for 270 yards, one touchdown on 28 attempts. It's fine. The stats look good. The actual translation of fantasy points vary depending on the type of league that you're in. I know it wasn't like the most incredible week, but going up against the Bengals, once again, a horrific defense. This is a guy that you can definitely find on the waivers. If you once again have a tough matchup heading into the next week, this is someone I cannot recommend enough. This just makes sense, in my opinion. But yeah, with that said, we're going to move along here. Oh, sorry. Let me say who I would pick here. I'll pick Russell Wilson going to the next week. I have more confidence in him. The pedigree, I actually think he flows better. I have nothing against Drake May. I think Drake May makes more sense as a dynasty perspective, obviously, as a rookie. But in this scenario, it's tough to trust Drake May to do consistent things, especially now it's crunch time. It's week 13. Every single week matters more and more. If you're one of those middling teams, right, you need wins. At this point, you're kind of looking at stuff like this, and you're trying to find, okay, if a guy is boom or bust, it might be worth taking that risk because you can no longer afford to just be safe. So in that scenario, I'm taking Russell Wilson. Moving on to the running backs, I'm going to be honest with you guys, a continuing trend on this show, and it seems in fantasy football as a whole, running back waiver wires are kind of boring. We've been talking a lot about handcuffs the past couple weeks. I've chosen to not go that route again. I mean, Trey Benson, Cam Akers, you know the deal. Yeah, you pick him up if you Braylon Allen, whatever the case may be. Pick him up if you need it, right? If you really are that kind of worried that they might get injured later down the line, but you don't need to. You're fine. You don't have to. So the one guy we got going on here is Amir Abdullah. I think I pronounced that correctly. Rostered in 25% of Yahoo Fantasy Leagues. My apologies. Going up against the Kansas City Chiefs next week. He had 8 rushes for 28 yards on the ground, and then he caught 5 of his 6 targets for 37 yards and a touchdown. This isn't anything crazy. He just happened to do really, really well here. I'm not saying to go pick him up so that he's going to be like the guy for you, right? Actually, really not at all. I'm running backs work because, like, surprisingly, there's not a lot of injuries to that position. Like now, like at the earlier on in the year, there was injuries everywhere, and now it's kind of stabled out of it, which is great for a lot of us, and in a sense, not so great for some of us who were kind of hoping and banking on people being sad or injured or just being bad. And this doesn't seem to be the case. Now, we had obviously some, how should I say, reservations about the running back core on the Raiders. Maybe this works out in your favor if you pick him up and he ends up doing something. But I would take all that with a grain of salt. This is a very desperation play. I would not play this guy. I'm personally fading him. I'm not going to bother. But yeah, with that being said, that's our running backs. We're going to move on to wide receivers. I got 4 guys to talk about here. First up, we got Noah Brown coming in at 10% rostered on Yahoo Fantasy Leagues. Going up against the Tennessee Titans upcoming week, he went 6 for 10 for 71 yards. Serviceable. Very, very serviceable. There's nothing wrong with that. Obviously, Scary Terry is there. There's, it is what it is. Should you pick up Noah Brown? Maybe. It could be funny. I mean, Scary Terry hasn't exactly, there are times where he kind of fades out into the limelight. Picking him up might not be the worst option. I am going to fade him, perhaps, for the next guy here. Trey Tucker, rostered in 4% of Yahoo Fantasy Leagues, going up against the Kansas City Chiefs next week. He went 7 for 8 for 82 yards. 7 catches, 8 targets, 82 yards. That is pretty good. Obviously, young guy. This is we kind of assumed he was going to be the one stepping into the role when Devontae Adams left, and that hasn't happened too much. Granted, the whole team is kind of a dumpster fire right now, so I can't blame him too much. I mean, for God's sake, they had Desmond Ridder, I believe, and I think they still do. They sign him off of the practice squad there, so from Houston. So trust me when I say this is not exactly a good solution here. It's very unfortunate, but this is kind of a guy. This is like a desperate flex play. Okay, this is that boom or bust potential I was talking about. That's Trey Tucker right now. But moving on, we got David Moore on the Carolina Panthers. I know, kind of surprising. I am also aware. He is rostered at 0% of Yahoo Fantasy Leagues. He had 6 catches for 80 yards, 1 touchdown on 10 targets. Going up against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers next week, will he reproduce? Bryce Young had a day. I don't anticipate that happening again. It might. I don't think it will. I think it's asking for a lot to want that result again. If it does, you know what? You played an excellent game and you had a great time playing this guy in your flex spot. But I would be very cautious with David Moore, and more so almost anybody on the Panthers, right? This trend continues. We need to see more from Bryce Young to kind of continue this trend going. But it's nevertheless very impressive. And finally, last but not least, we have Calvin Austin III, rostered in a whole 1% of Yahoo fantasy leagues. Going up against the Bengals this week, he caught all 3 of his targets for 78 yards and a touchdown. He kind of does this. This is like the second or third time he's done this year. Very kind of boomer bust guy. Once again, if you're in a very dire situation, injuries are plaguing you, matchups are bad, guys you kind of drafted aren't really kind of panning out the way that you thought they would, I can understand wanting to pick up Calvin Austin III and playing him, but I wouldn't. Once again, you're going to notice here there's a good trend here. There's not really anything like tantalizing in the wide receiver area here, and that's kind of a trend throughout the whole thing. I did just get a report that CeeDee Lamb is in fact questionable. I haven't read it yet. I'm going to assume he's going to be fine for Thursday's game. If not, there are definitely options there for you to pick up. We're going to go to one of those options in the tight end area. A little sneak peek. But this is kind of how we are right now. There's not really a lot of injuries going on. It's very stable, which is a really, really weird thing to say this kind of late into the season. So, yeah, a lot of boomer bust candidates here. If you're asking me who I'm going to pick up and who I have like any potential starting in my flex, I think Trey Tucker and Calvin Austin III definitely take the cake, and I just wouldn't bother with Noah Brown and David Moore. I think Noah Brown is the most stable of the options there, which is like fine if you want to pick him up. I just feel like I would rather have the boomer bust candidate personally, especially like if I need the wins. If you don't, Noah Brown's probably fine. You're probably good there. But yeah, moving on to the tight end position, you know, I keep making the joke, like earlier on in the season, that this tight end is like the black abyssal void of positions and yada, blah, 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 blah. It's kind of become like running backs, to be quite honest with you. There's like nothing going on there. And tight ends, you know, we keep talking about like, oh yeah, chase the targets, they'll give you results. That's kind of what's happening. And it's kind of like equalizing everything else out. So this week, we got 3 guys. We have Luke Schoonmaker. Really hope I pronounced that right. I'm pretty sure I did. He's rostered in 11% of Yahoo Fantasy Leagues, going up against the New York Giants this Thanksgiving Day. Unfortunately, gotta watch him while I'm eating dinner on the big screen. Gonna be a great time watching the Giants lose. Tommy DeVito, the Paisano, not doing anything. Who would have guessed? But yeah, back to Luke Schoonmaker. He caught 3 caught 3 balls for 55 yards and 1 touchdown on 4 targets. A solid sort of result there, and going up against a weak New York Giants defense, I don't, if you need a tight end, I don't see why you wouldn't do this, especially if CeeDee Lamb doesn't play. Moving on to the Bears. We got Cole Kmet, rostered in 47% of fantasy leagues. I was kind of surprised by this, but I guess it makes sense considering how bad Caleb Williams has been doing. They're running up against the Detroit Lions. Last week, he caught 7 balls for 64 yards on 10 targets. That's not a bad stat line. I mean, 64 yards is nothing. I mean, the 7 catches alone is fantastic, especially in PPR leagues, right? Half PPR is also fine, right? It's a very promising stat. Also very promising that he saw the 10 targets. Caleb Williams looked really good. Obviously, kind of entering a new frontier in this Detroit Lions team, which kind of seems like the best team in football right now. They just seem to be good at everything. So this is kind of a true test for the Bears. Would I feel confident starting Cole Kmet? Not really, no, but he will probably get the targets. So he's not going to do what he did last week, but he might get you 6 or 7 points. So that might be okay for you. If you don't have like one of those like top 2 or 3 guys, But moving on, our last guy here is a really funny kind of prospect. We got Noah Gray, rostered in 4% of fantasy Yahoo League. Fantasy. Oh man. Sorry about that. Rostered in 4% on Yahoo Fantasy Football. Going up against the Las Vegas Raiders, he caught all 4 of his targets for 66 yards and 2 touchdowns. So this is kind of like currently the bane of every Travis Kelce owner's existence right now. This guy just kind of being there and doing what he's doing. I would pick him up if you have Travis Kelce. Personally. I would do it. I feel like the thought of him just kind of stealing away, like, I don't think he'll steal the job, but like the thought of him getting injured, Travis Kelce, knowing how high you probably drafted him and how much you had to like kind of circulate that into your draft strategy, you might need this failsafe. He is old. It is possible. While unfortunately it doesn't look like that might be the case anymore, obviously the loss is there, so they're not chasing that perfect record. There's still a chance that he does get hurt. So definitely keep that in mind. If you have Travis Kelce, I would consider picking him up. With that being said, that is the end of our position players. Now we have some defensive streamers. I got two guys here I want to look at. Nothing too crazy. I got the Dallas Cowboys going up against the New York Giants. You could maybe make the argument both ways, which is a really, really weird thing to say. If CeeDee Lamb does sit out, I could see the argument going both ways, but definitely siding with the Dallas Cowboys side here. So they had a really good day last week, and I think they can definitely reciprocate that on Thanksgiving. I guess afternoon, not day, but you get what I'm saying here. And then you also have the Kansas City Chiefs against the Las Vegas Raiders. We kind of alluded to it before. The offense is in shambles there. Obviously, they're in very much rebuild mode. So the Chiefs defense into a rebuilding team should not come to a surprise at all. But yeah, with that being said, that is our waiver show for this week. I hope, I wish you all a good luck on your waivers. I hope you all get the players that you're looking for. Please, if you think I missed any players, drop down in the comments below. I want to hear your opinions. I want to hear your after. I want to hear where you're struggling, where you're succeeding at. Please like, share, follow, subscribe, whatever platform you're watching this on right now. Without further ado, I hope you all have an excellent rest of your night. I hope that by the time this posts on Tuesday, I hope the Monday Night Football game went really well for you, unless, of course, you already know you're facing me. In that case, I really hope it doesn't go well for you. But once again, I hope you all have a wonderful night, and I'll see you all very, very soon.